We will continue on with Chapter 7 and more theft crimes. In this presentation, we're going to focus only on the Model Penal Code and its definitions of the various crimes. The Model Penal Code, in its theft statutes, focuses on depriving an owner of their property. And as you can see here, there are basically two ways that a thief can deprive an owner of his or her property. One is what we normally think of, which is you withhold the property of that person either permanently or for such an extended period of time as it is for such a period of time that it basically loses a major, as the Model Penal Code says, a major portion of its economic value. So this isn't, taking someone's pen for a couple seconds and writing something and putting it back down on the table, but you're either withholding it permanently or you're taking for such a period of time that it's essentially cost the owner a major portion of its economic value. So again, we would, if you're caught while you have the stolen property, then we would assume that basically you were planning to take it away permanently from the owner. That would be the deprivation that we'd find in most thefts. But it could be these others where you're just keeping it for a long period of time and basically destroying its economic value. We can see there's also another or. It's or with intent to restore only upon payment of reward or other compensation. So if you take something and say, I'm not giving it back to you until you pay me to get it back, that would also be depriving the owner. The second way, so those were really three subways under the first part of deprivation. The second way, major way that you can deprive someone is to dispose of the property, so to get rid of it, so as to make it unlikely the owner will recover it. So maybe you don't keep it for yourself, as we would assume that you're doing in Part A, but in Part B you get rid of it so it makes it unlikely that the owner will ever get it back. So you sell it, you destroy it, whatever you may do, but the owner will not be able to recover it. So either of those two ways, A or B, are ways that you can deprive someone of their property. The first kind of theft that we'll look at, so these mirror some of the ones we already looked at in the first presentation, the PowerPoint presentation that we made for Chapter 7 when we talked about the common law. But the first major category of Model Penal Code theft is theft by unlawful taking or disposition. So this is what we normally think of when we think of a theft. So we can see that a person is guilty of theft if he unlawfully takes or exercises control over movable property of another with purpose to deprive him thereof. So you are taking the thing, you are exercising such control over it, and that thing is movable property. So again, it's personal property, it's not real estate, it's not intellectual property, but you unlawfully take or exercise control over the movable property of another person, and your purpose, your intent, is to deprive them, as we just defined deprive. You can see that it can also apply to immovable property, so maybe real estate or whatever, a business, an interest in a business or whatever it may be. But a person is guilty of theft if he unlawfully transfers immovable property of another or any interest with purpose to benefit himself or another not entitled. So if you somehow transfer illegally the deed to someone's house or a partnership share in a business or whatever it may be, if you somehow unlawfully transfer it and your purpose is to benefit yourself or another person who was not entitled to have that property, then you've committed a theft. So it can involve immovable property, but under certain circumstances. Theft by deception. This is theft by trickery that we talked about with the common law theft. We're not going to go into each of these provisions, but I will give you a little time as I talk now to just kind of glance over them. But basically they all deal with somehow tricking someone into giving you the property. So for instance, in the first subsection, if you create or reinforce a false impression, and then there are a bunch of other contingencies, but basically it's a false impression, then if that's how you acquire property and you've deprived a person of their property through creating a false impression, and it has to be, as we'll see, we're going to cover fraud in another presentation, it has to be some kind of material false impression. So if it's just a minor element that wouldn't have made a difference in the person's decision to give you the property, then that wouldn't be considered theft by deception. But if it's something major, if you say, I am going to pay you tomorrow for this property I'm taking from you, and you have no intention of doing so, then it could be theft by deception. Or if you go up to their door and you say, I'm canning for Thon, and you're not. You're trying to get a donation from them, but you don't represent anyone. You just represent yourself, but you give them the impression that you're canning for a charity. You're collecting for a charity, and they turn over their money to you. Any of these kinds of things, and much more serious kinds of frauds, can be included in that first one. Part 2, if you prevent somebody from acquiring essential information that would affect their judgment. So this isn't just, again, a minor interference, but this is you're purposely preventing them from acquiring certain information that would affect your judgment. So if you know that this car has no engine, but you won't let them look under the hood and you sell it to them, then obviously that would be, and if they did buy it from you, that would be theft by deception. If you wouldn't allow them to actually look under the hood and find out there's nothing there, there's no engine, you won't let them start it, you won't let them get inside the car, any of those kinds of things. So it's, again, some kind of purposeful obstruction. Third one is you fail to correct a false impression, which you previously created. The person, again, believes that you're some kind of, you represent some charity or whatever it is, and you don't correct that impression later. Maybe you didn't tell them you were from the charity, but they believe that you were because they were mistaken. They thought you were someone else. And so you just let them believe it. I'm not going to, on the test, I'm not going to ask you to remember each of these. I just want you to know generally what theft by deception is. So don't think, I've got to memorize each way that you can deceive someone. No. But I'm just going through these to give you an idea of what it could be. And again, you can see in number 4, another failure to disclose some information. So these are all theft by extortion. Is when you use some kind of threatening behavior to get the property from another person. So this isn't someone willfully turning over their property to you, but you've threatened them to in order to obtain that property. And so, the easiest thing is to think of maybe organized criminals, the mob, and they're threatening to break your kneecaps, bust your kneecaps unless you pay them a certain amount of money. They're threatening to burn down your restaurant unless you give them partial ownership of it. These kinds of things. This would be extortion. You're threatening them to get the particular items. So you can see if you just glance at these 7 things that are on the list, and again, I don't want you to memorize these for the test, but you can see they can include a threat to inflict bodily injury on that person or commit any other criminal offense on that person who owns the thing or maybe someone who's related to them. Secondly, if you accuse anyone of a criminal offense. Now again, this isn't when maybe the person is legitimately a criminal, but you're accusing them and you're basically blackmailing them. You're telling them that if they don't pay you money, you'll accuse them of the criminal offense. Thirdly, if you expose any secret that the person may have, that, again, if you read the Model Penal Code, that will tend to subject them to hatred, contempt, ridicule, impair their credit, business repute, those things. So again, extortion can be blackmail. It's not just breaking their kneecaps, but you're threatening to reveal secrets about them, threatening to accuse them of a criminal offense, those kinds of things. Fourth, you threaten to take or withhold action as an official or cause someone to take or withhold action. So you're a police officer. If you pay me money, I won't arrest you. So they're shaking down maybe a drug dealer, taking kickbacks, taking bribes. So this could be extortion. Number 5, it deals with people who say they're going to bring about a strike, boycott, or other kind of action against an employer unless they're paid money. So again, more kickbacks. Number 6, you want money or else you'll testify or provide information, withhold testimony or information with respect to someone's legal claim. So, pay me to shut up, pay me to testify, any of those kinds of things, when it's really your duty to testify without payment. And then finally, you threaten to inflict any harm, other harm, which would not benefit the actor. So you threaten to do something else that would cause them some kind of damage. Theft of lost, mislaid, or misdelivered property. Again, we covered this under the common law definitions, but again, you can see under the Model Penal Code, if you come into control of property of another, and so here's a mental element, it's not just that you accidentally found it, but you know that it's lost, mislaid, or misdelivered. So the prosecutor would have to show that you had that knowledge. You're guilty of theft if, with the purpose to deprive the owner, so if your purpose is to keep it permanently, you fail to take reasonable measures to restore the property to the one entitled to it. So again, we don't expect you to spend 5 years of your life trying to track down someone because you found a $20 bill in the street. That wouldn't be reasonable. But if you saw it just fall out of their pocket, then you'd be expected to return it. Now again, what are the chances you're ever going to get caught if that person walks away? But nonetheless, if you could easily return it to the person, whether it's misdelivered to your house or it's mislaid, they've misplaced it or they've lost it, there is an expectation that you should try to return it to the owner. But it's only a reasonable measure. We're not going to expect you to spend all of your life and all of your life's earnings to return this piece of property to someone.